Hey guys and girls, hope you're all doing well. Bored now. Back with Rachel McDonald, warring like an old married couple as always. This is going to be our review of Stranger Things, Season 1, Episode 6, Chapter 6. It is called The Monster. And again, well, short and simple this time. The last episode title, we were wondering what could that mean. Definitely no ambiguity this time. It's about the monster in the Upside Down. The monster which Nancy obviously comes across. She's dragged under that tree, tense and frantic. And
Yeah.
I would think watching this at the time, you may be in two minds whether they are going to kill Nancy off here. It seems like it could be a possibility. Even
Yeah.
though she obviously feels like a big character, but it's, for stakes and everything. But I think what the episode does do, as obviously he does save her in time, is the episode definitely does a good job of selling the monster and its threat. And that comes across in the scenes after this with Jonathan and Nancy. The fact that neither one of them wants to spend the night alone, sort of thing, that they want to.
It's very sweet and very realistic, I think, that scene where they don't want to be alone after. Because when you experience something that scary and that traumatic, you wouldn't, and knowing that thing is out there, you definitely would not want to be alone after that.
Yeah, Nancy especially, because she's the one who went through it. She's particularly afraid. And again, something the show does well is it really builds on that stuff and pays it off. It doesn't just flick it away in the next sort of scene. It sort of actually takes some time showing like the effects of something like that on Nancy. When she's in the shower, she's very sort of like fragile and a bit upset. We can't take for granted that it can't get at us in here. So stuff like that, it's effectively selling the threat of the monster, which is really good stuff. And obviously it goes to like the character stuff, and obviously at the same time, because we do have a potential like romance here between the two, it again doesn't feel that it's a forced way of them being together. Obviously nothing happens anyway. They're just there for each other as friends at this point, but some drama comes out of it because obviously Steve sees them together in the same room and obviously jumps to the conclusion that something's going on, and that leads to the scene we get a bit later.
This episode obviously has Steve's lowest and worst moments. And even me, as a Steve lover, will admit that he does mess up in this episode. Now, again, I think there are reasons. Like, Steve is not just outright being... So basically, we see him driving to Nancy's house. And again, I think we see that he really does, or at least he's starting to get to know Nancy, because he's going there not out of jealousy or possessiveness, but because he thinks something is wrong. As he says to his friends, he's like, she was acting weird. Something is going on with her. I just want to make sure she's okay. Now, we see what dicks his friends are. Like, honestly, Steve, why are you hanging out with these two? They are such assholes, Carol and Tommy. Like, they're even assholes to him, and he's supposed to be their friend, you know?
Yeah.
And they're like teasing him and he's like, dude, shut up, just shut up. And I'm like, yes, good, tell them off, because they are just dickwads. I hate Carol and Tommy. They're another two characters that I would have loved if the monster just jumped up out of nowhere and ate them. Why doesn't the monster eat any bad characters? It's not doing its job. But yeah, so we see Steve go over, and of course he sees Nancy and Jonathan on her bed, and he jumps to, I think most teenage boys would jump to that conclusion. Your girlfriend blew you up earlier that day. She's not telling you something. You can tell that she's being a bit shifty, that she's hiding something. And he sees them in the window, and he is obviously hurt. That being said, letting your friends graffiti Nancy the Slut Wheeler on public property is not on. What you do is you go and you talk to your girlfriend, you don't jump to all the wrong conclusions and just decide, oh yeah, I'm just going to let my friends deface public property and be dicks, So I think this is kind of Steve, like, he may not have done the graffiti, but he definitely did not stop them. And it's kind of like him being an asshole through inaction.
Sure.
When Nancy confronts him, he does try to ask her to tell him the truth. He's all like, tell me what's going on. And she doesn't. And again, you can understand why she doesn't, but you can also understand why Steve is upset. However, I think Steve's worst moment in this episode is when he starts to goad Jonathan. He starts to push him and he's obviously trying to bait him into a fight. Now, if he had just kept it about Nancy, maybe it wouldn't have been so bad. But the fact that he starts saying your whole family is crazy, your mum's crazy, no wonder your brother went missing. I was just like, whoa, Steve, buddy, back off. Like, this dude's already going through enough. You don't have to be a dick about it. But he is, and he starts a fight. And he's Steve Harrington, so of course he gets his butt kicked because Steve never wins fights. This is like a running thing with Steve. So I do think that this episode shows Steve at his worst. As we go on with the season, we can talk about the consequences of this episode. But this episode was the first time that Steve met my very low expectations of him. This was the first time that he actually did the wrong thing, and I think that he was quite a dick in this episode. And I do think that he definitely stepped over the line and that he went too far. I understand that he was hurt. It wasn't without reason. So it wasn't like he was just being an asshole for the sake of being an asshole. He was definitely hurt. He obviously really likes Nancy and he thought that she was cheating on him, which is obviously not a good thing. And when you're a teenager, your emotions and your hormones, they're out of control. So you do really stupid shit. But goading Jonathan into fighting him by talking about Will's disappearance and saying that his mother was crazy, that's getting too personal. And I thought that was Steve, you've crossed the line here. You need to back off. So those are my thoughts. This is one of those episodes where, no, Steve's just a dick. He definitely messes up in this episode. What are your thoughts?
There's no drama between us this time because
okay, we're on the same page.
I agree with you. Yeah, the graffiti is terrible. I mean, that's obviously making a public spectacle of Nancy. As he said, I agree with you. Then it's understandable. Then he jumped to the conclusion, but he obviously went about it completely the wrong way and over the top. It's even if there was something, it's hardly like the punishment fitted the crime. I mean,
exactly.
The punishment went way over the top. And again, it's that horrible sexist double standard applied to a girl. So she goes with a guy in theory, so she becomes a slut sort of thing. And obviously when it's a guy, it's the other way around. It's, nothing's made of it. And so I mean, obviously that's terrible. It's obviously a good point you make then. He was wrong to let his friends do it, but importantly, it was his friends, their sort of message. So in a way, it sort of at least clears him. Then maybe he doesn't have those sorts of thoughts himself. But it's just that he should have put a stop to it. But yeah, obviously the really sort of terrible stuff with him is, he goes way too far with Jonathan and
he does.
And again, it's his friends are terrible in that bit as well. The way they're just, egging him on and, picking a fight. They just really annoy me. Unfortunately, it's in quite a realistic way that I can sort of buy. So it's just but at times I just wish they'd just leave a scene really and sort of shut up sort of thing.
I know, right?
Because in a way, drama can play out without them, but in drama when it wants to, because the flow of the scene and how disturbing it gets at time. Because obviously when Jonathan gets really upset, he pulverizes Steve. I mean, it looks very convincing. And obviously they end up getting arrested, more so Jonathan really, but Nancy's given from the secretary at the police station. And
we're about to have an argument.
Okay.
I don't like that line, but you give your thoughts and then I'll rebut.
Well, it's a little bit cliched because it's the sort of line that gets used a lot in these sorts of things. And Nancy immediately distances herself from the idea of them being a couple, says, he's not my boyfriend. Says, well, someone should tell him that. And says, really, the only time someone gets that crazy and that, you know, kind of stupid is when they're in love with you. And obviously what I like in the next bit is the Nancy who cottons on to the way Jonathan feels. She doesn't say anything. She just goes in and she's supportive. And so I certainly, from Nancy's point of view, I like that because she's very sensitive. So you're ready to just shit on the whole thing, basically.
Okay. I hate that line for several reasons. Okay. So first of all, I love Flo, but she doesn't know these kids. Okay. She literally has no idea of the situation. So you can't just come in and say, oh yeah, this dude's in love with you because you only get that crazy over whatever. Secondly, and we have an issue with John. But the thing is, I don't think she is. I'm not saying that Jonathan doesn't have feelings for Nancy, okay? He obviously is developing feelings for her. But the reason that he gets so angry at Steve is not because of Nancy, it's because Steve mentions Will. So, yes, he is going crazy for love, but he's going crazy because he loves his brother, not because he loves Nancy.
Yeah, true.
And so, for me, that was just one of those things that I really hate when it comes to couples in any TV show. You need to show, not tell. And this is the opposite. This is telling, not showing. And unfortunately, Nancy and Jonathan have a little bit. So several issues with this. First of all, Flo doesn't know these two people. She has no idea what's going on. So like, Flo, I love you, but yeah, you gotta be quiet. Second of all, relationships, they must be show, don't tell. And this is tell, don't show. You can't have a character come in and tell another character that someone else has feelings for them. It's supposed to develop naturally. And this is what I was talking about with Nancy and Jonathan not feeling that organic to me. And thirdly, Jonathan is not in love with Nancy. Not saying he doesn't have feelings for her, but the reason that he got so upset with Steve was because of Will. So yes, he's gotten crazy out of love, but it's love for his brother, not for Nancy. Now, if they just let this develop naturally, would have been a bit better. But you can't have a character come in and be like, oh yeah, he went all crazy for love. It's like, shut up, Flo. It's just not a thing. And like I said, when we get to season 2, we're going to be talking about this more because Creepy Conspiracy Guy is like, again, just a mouthpiece to say Jonathan should be together. So so we're on opposite sides here. It's just not gonna
Well, no, I think you've convinced me up to a point. I'm actually impressed. You know what the secretary's name is because I didn't.
I just think of the coffee and contemplation. Flo.
You make some good points. Obviously, I think in her defense a little bit, she wasn't actually at the scene, so she didn't know. She probably is just assuming. She's just it's the tone of the scene is was just one of those where it's a coming of age thing, it's life lessons, and it's sort of her being the sort of wise one. But I mean, I guess arguably, if she wasn't at the scene, she's got even less right to comment on it. But I think in her defense, because she wasn't there, because obviously Nancy might have stoked him on a bit originally, because obviously he saw the sign as well. But yeah, definitely when he pulverizes Steve, it's more because of what he's saying.
Definitely because of Will. So in theory, I do agree with what Flo is saying. She's just saying it about the wrong person. You do really only go that crazy out of love, but it's not romantic love he's going crazy out of. It's because of his brother. And again, I'm not saying that Jonathan doesn't have feelings for Nancy at this point, because it is very obvious that he is starting to develop feelings for her. I think to say that he's in love with her is like a big leap. And secondly, it's just not, at least for me, that is not what I saw in that scene. Like, I don't think that Jonathan got into that fight because of Nancy. I think because if you watch the scene closely, he doesn't start to retaliate until Steve starts talking about his family. And then he starts to get really upset, which is completely understandable. Like I said earlier, Steve is a complete dick in that scene. So he kind of deserves to get punched in the face, not to the extent that Jonathan does punch him. Like, Jonathan really does start to get out of control, and it's like, okay, dude, he's bleeding now, let's back off. But he totally deserved the punch.
I think what Flo says actually impacts that much outside of
fair enough.
You know, because I think, as we've said, Jonathan and Nancy have kind of come together in quite an organic sort of way. And it's arguable that maybe you don't need a romance between them. Maybe they just would work better as friends anyway. But
and
whatever.
I have that feeling sometimes watching season 1. I'm like, this doesn't need to be a romance. This could just be two people bonding over shared trauma, and it could just be a friendship.
Nancy handles it in the next sort of scene. You know, the fact
she's
that
sweet.
She knows this knowledge, and she doesn't sort of. Also, I think another defense is just in that end bit of the scene is she's again quite young and impressionable, so she's sort of going on what Flo's saying. But I don't mind the scene as much as you, because I just justify it as it's just one of those scenes where it's a little bit of a quirky scene, and it's just in a coming of age sort of show where
fair enough.
It's like obviously it's slightly misplaced sort of wisdom, but it's kind of wisdom nonetheless, and it's just a scene that makes you. I mean, maybe not so much you, but the idea is it makes you sort of warm to Flo, and it's just a quirky sort of character type thing. No, I can understand what you're saying there. I can see that stuff.
Well, before we move on from Nancy, Jonathan, and Steve, if I do stuff, I do want to say that I do love the scene where Nancy and Jonathan are in the hardware store and they're, shopping, and they go and the store clerk just watches them put down bear traps and a kerosene can and like hammers and like nails, and then they're like, oh yeah, and we need like 2 boxes of ammo, and he's like, what are you kids doing with this? And Nancy's just like, monster hunting, truth is stranger than fiction. So I do like that scene, and again it shows Nancy and Jonathan being very proactive. They've decided that they're going to kill this thing, they're going to hunt it. That's right, Nancy figures out at the beginning of the episode she's been researching like wild creatures, and she's like, they're drawn to blood, I think we can draw it out. So you can see them forming their plan to kind of go after the Demogorgon. And so I really like that, showing them being proactive and doing their shopping and figuring out what they need in order to take down this creature. So I do like that part. And then obviously it's followed by all the badness, but we need that to get to, the next part. So yeah, the Nancy and Jonathan and Steve stuff, not that easy to watch because really is Steve's lowest moment, but I think it's important for their journeys. And when we get to the next episode, we'll see why it was important for like all of them to kind of have to go through this. So that's definitely good stuff there. So the rest of the episode, this one, well, what else do we have happening? Again, it's getting to the point where kind of the episodes are kind of bleeding together, because everything's just kind of happening in very, very quick succession, and it's hard to keep track of what happens in which episode. I think Hopper and Joyce in this episode, they go to see Terry Ives. Is this?
Yeah,
this is where
talk a bit about that. Yeah.
So we're getting more. We're getting more into the conspiracy side of things. So the MTSK and everything like that. So we see them go to see Terry Ives, who we discover, or at least we get very, very, very strong implications that she is Elle's biological mother. So that's I always thought this part was really interesting. They see Terry's sister, and she's telling them about the experiments that were done on Terry, and that's right. She says to Hopper a couple of times when Hopper kind of brings up some stuff like the government, she's like, I think you and Terry would really get along, Yeah. But I think, again, this is like a really good scene to give us more pieces of the puzzle, to see Elle's background, to see, why she was taken and when she was taken. So
daughter went missing, and someone says about there was like someone or other was seen with a kid with a bald head or like shaven head.
Yes, because they were talking about they were talking about the guys at Benny's Diner had said that they'd seen the kid with the shaved head, and they thought that maybe it might have been Will. And this is when Hopper realizes, okay, maybe there's another kid out there, and that these guys have taken Will, and that this kid has come from there. So yeah, we get some more pieces kind of fall into place with that.
Really organic, really natural, and they come across it, and there's a sense of clues leading them there rather than it being like too much of a coincidence or a lead. Whatever. It's really tight sort of storytelling. Random question, because obviously we're getting more of Hopper and Joyce together on screen. Did you ever ship them, or did you just see them as more of a maybe friends, sort of? neutral.
I kind of always enjoyed their dynamic, and
Yeah.
I was kind of of the mind frame of, if you do decide to make this romantic, that'll be fine, but if you don't, that'll also be fine. And
That's
that was my
fine as
thought in
well.
season 1. Season 2 kind of changed all that, because there's a certain character in season 2 that I just love and who I think is so much better for Joyce.
Oh yeah. of
So
course.
after season 2, not so much, but I do very much understand why people ship Hopper and Joyce. Like, even though
Yeah.
I don't actually, I completely understand why people do. What about you? What are your feelings on Hopper and
Yeah.
Joyce?
Probably similar. Probably similar. I work well as a pairing, regardless of whether it's romantic or not. I mean, probably, I guess, from what you're saying, it feels a bit less of a forced romance than maybe the other one does. You know,
Yes.
but
Yeah.
it's either way, I think they're probably good together, and it's just funny because I remember watching the first season at the time, and I'll give a mention to Becca here, obviously one of our big Stranger Things fans on this channel, because I remember watching episodes with her at the time and I kept saying, yeah, it's gonna happen, you can tell it's gonna happen, and she was against it. She's like, no, it's not gonna. And at one point she's like, oh my god, is Keith gonna be right, is it gonna. So I remember, regardless of whether I thought it was a good idea or not, I was, because I predicted it for the longest time, I was like, come on, get together, because I want to be right. So yeah, I think we're on the same page with that one. So we can.
Yeah. Look, I love their dynamic. I love any scene with Hopper and Joyce. You know, in the first couple of seasons, I think they have a really sweet dynamic. I think Hopper is really good with her, especially once he realizes that she's actually telling the truth. I think they have good chemistry. David Harbour and Winona Ryder. I think they work really well on screen together. So like I said, well, I don't actively ship Hopper and Joyce. I do completely understand why people do, and given that the other character that I love no longer has a future with Joyce, I'll be okay with her ending up with Hopper if that's the case. So I do, however, think he needs to sort himself out a little bit, because he's a little unstable, and so is Joyce. So it's like, you put two unstable people together, maybe not the best combination. So maybe he sorts himself out a bit.
Yeah, another thing actually to say is I actually see them as making good parents. If you see not necessarily outside of whether they make a good couple, but sort of good parental figure sort of thing in the show, which obviously, Hopper does become like a parental figure for Al and, different people. And in some ways, his role as the town sheriff and stuff, he does, over many years, he has built up connections with the community, so he probably does know the various kids very well. So
and he's showing such genuine concern for Will, and he's obviously very concerned for him. And then when we see like the season go on, we see that he and Joyce do work together to help protect Will and protect Elle. So yeah, I do agree with them being like a good unit as far as parenting goes. And I do like watching their journey over like the first couple of seasons. I think Joyce and Hopper they're both such great characters individually, and you put them together and it's like, it's fantastic. So I do enjoy seeing them together.
So yeah, some of the best scenes probably of the show with those two on screen together. But so I'm gonna say, I think MVP of this episode is Dustin. I think it's a brilliant episode for Dustin.
100%.
He's obviously had other like sort of scene stealers in other episodes, but I think he is the MVP here, because I love how important he is in bringing everyone back together and like mending that sort of rift they have. I like, because he is really sensible and fair to everyone, but I love that speech, obviously, about, he tells Will, well, you drew first blood, so you've got to be the one to apologize, shake his hand. And obviously it's a cute little like teenage thing, them having like rules that you have to like sort of stick to. It's very realistic type thing, but
it's adorable.
It is yourself to them again as a group. And Dustin's so great in this really throughout, and obviously because at the end of that scene he just says, we're going over to get Lucas and then we're going to find out. So he's he's obviously being fair to everyone, and he gets them back on track. And obviously, again, things totally don't go as you would expect, because you might expect in the next scene then Lucas and him would sort of make up, which they don't completely, because Lucas still has a downer on Al, where she's sort of saying, yeah, we go to the gate, but we go to the gate, not us and Al. You know, she isn't part of this group. So again, I think obviously what happened in the last episode is important for the storytelling, important to really bring this all to a head. So I think obviously when it does tie itself up later on, it means even more. And I sort of, Lucas obviously goes off on his own, and he's sort of got his like Rambo sort of headwear type thing, and
he's so cute.
and what's good about it is, even though you're again a little bit annoyed at him for, you know, slagging off Al again, it sort of still makes you root for him, because he's sort of doing this on his own, and he's actually doing this to try and help the cause, and you know, help Will out and
help find Will.
So it's actually really good character stuff for Lucas. But yeah, Dustin is so good in the episode.
He's fantastic. I also really love how he points out, like, Mike is like, you know, oh, Elle was just trying to protect us. Lucas was being an ass. And Dustin's like, yeah, well, so were you. And so was Elle. He's like, all three of you were completely out of line. I was the only one being sensible. And I'm like, yeah, Dustin, you tell him. Because he's right. They were kind of all in the wrong there, you know, all of them. And then I really like when he points out to Mike how Lucas is jealous. You know, he's like, he's jealous because you have a new friend. He's like, he's been your best friend for years, and all of a sudden this new girl comes along and you're paying attention to her. And I really love how Mike is all like, look, he's my best friend, but so are you, and so is Will. And Dustin's like, you can't have more than one best friend. And Mike's like, yes, you can, and you're all my best friends. And I just think that's really great.
That's a great scene. Yeah, that's
and I also love when they're at Lucas's house, when they're talking about how Elle threw him across like the place, and Dustin's like, yeah, but you got to admit, it was pretty cool. She threw you with her mind. And I just love how enthusiastic he is about Elle's powers and stuff. And of course, you see him and Mike go off and try and search for Elle. But yeah, I think all the kids have really strong characterization in this. Again, like Lucas, like you said, even though you are annoyed with him for like maybe being a bit stubborn, you can see that he really does love his friends, and he really is determined to go and help find Will. And yeah, it's really cute how he puts on the Rambo outfit and he goes out with his bike and he's determined to go to the gate. It's really adorable. And then of course you have Elle in this episode, poor thing, out there by herself because she's run away. And we get that great scene when she goes to the supermarket and she calls the guy a mouth breather, and then she just grabs all the Eggos out of the freezer and walks out and like shatters the door behind her. Like, it shows that she obviously can take care of herself. And then, oh my God, let's talk about the scene with the bullies, because like, I generally don't hate child characters because they're children, but Jesus Christ, do I hate this bully. Like, the one, like, he literally is going to, like, cut Dustin. Like, he has, like, a knife. I was saying to Stephen, I was like, how young are these kids? How do they have access to, like, switchblades and stuff? And he almost gets Mike to kill himself because he gets him to, like, jump off that cliff, which we'd already been told by Hopper that if you jumped off that cliff from that height, the water would essentially be concrete. And, you know, you'd hit it and basically die. It's a really intense scene, that scene. Like, wow, these kids are psychotic.
Yeah, that was an odd one to read, because obviously as the scene went on, I thought, well, something's going to happen here where they're going to save him or something. And I wondered how far they were going. I also didn't know if Mike understood, then if he jumped, he would probably die. I guess it's...
See, I don't think he did. I don't think he did. Because, I mean, when I was a kid, I would have thought, you know, oh, there's water down here, so it'll just be a really far fall, you know? No, I don't think Mike understood that if he jumped off that, he would die. But of course, we get Elle to the rescue, and it's a great scene where she comes and she saves Mike. The music in that scene is one of my favorite pieces of music in the entire series. It's that beautiful, big pounding like synth music. It's so good. And I love Dustin, like, because she breaks the bully's arm, which again, I don't really condone violence against children, but that kid had it coming.
Probably justified, yeah.
Such a little psycho. And I love as they're running off, Dustin's like, yeah, she's our friend and she's crazy. You keep running. And it's so cute.
Yeah,
and then, of course, we get the flashback showing how they sent Elle back into, like, the Hawkins Labs people. They put her back into the sensory deprivation tank, and they're like, you're going to make contact with that monster. They're reaching out to you. It wants to talk to you. Creepy Matthew Modine is all like, you go and you make contact. And we see that the first contact with the Demogorgon was so traumatizing for Elle that it activated her powers and it opened up the gate. And then that's what, so she's not only trying to protect them.
Important.
Yes, she has some guilt. Yeah, and which is ridiculous because she's an 11-year-old kid. Like, this is not her fault at all. But she obviously feels guilty. And then as we get towards the end of the episode, we see the vans leave Hawkins' lab and you see Lucas watching, and we get that great bit of suspense with the music as the kids go home and they think they're safe, but the vans are coming and the guys are coming to get them. And it's like, again, we have that great suspense at the end of the episode.
Yeah, cliffhanger. Yeah.
Yeah, just another really solid episode. Lots going on, lots happening. We're kind of barreling towards the finale now, and the last 2 episodes are going to be like so action-packed. So again, just another really solid episode. I don't think we've come across a bad one at all this season so far. So really enjoyed this one.
Yeah, because I think another thing is it's again worth highlighting that those flashbacks without. Each one has served a purpose. Each one has been just because sometimes with flashbacks, I'm not the biggest fan.
I hear
they can be overdone, but you can't really fault any of them. I think all of them have served a purpose and important backstory stuff. And also, I think going back to that scene with Mike, him jumping. I think it's another important character beat for him because it shows how willing he is to sacrifice himself potentially, for his friends. So this episode,
how strong their bond is.
Yeah, this episode really sells their bond because you also get when obviously Lucas isn't there, but the other 3 when they reunited with Elle, they even hug sort of thing, and
it's a beautiful little shot. The 3 of them hugging on the cliff.
Yeah, it's an important moment because it actually confirms for the first time that they are a unit. Because obviously Dustin has had his doubts about Elle as well, so it's probably the first time in this episode I think that Dustin has like fully accepted her.
Yes.
So,
yes.
And we just need to get the other piece now, which is Lucas. But it's an important scene, that one, definitely, and a great episode for them as a group. So okay, so that's Stranger Things episode 6 now. So the monster. Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Obviously, share your thoughts on anything that we've discussed in this review. Like and subscribe as always. And before we go, Rachel, if you want to promote your channel.
Guys, you can follow my YouTube channel, Rachel McDonald, video essays on TV shows and movies, mostly from the 90s and early 2000s. Tumblr and Twitter are also on there, and Keith usually puts a link in the description, so come and follow me everywhere.
Okay, thanks, guys. Keep watching TV. Keep watching Stranger Things. 2 more episodes to go now from season 1. We'll be back with them soon. See you later. Bye.